The anxious dog persistently barked at a policeman, then proceeded to guide him to a deeply unsettling scene. Join us to witness what unfolded as the policeman followed the dog's lead. People often give animals jobs because they're good at them. Dogs, for example, are very clever and can be wonderful friends. They can also learn lots of tricks. Sometimes, though, they figure out things on their own without being taught. When Madison was a kid, she really liked having pets. Her big Labrador was her best friend, and she loved spending time with him. This made her happy when she was little. Madison had lots of friends, but she couldn't always do the same things they did. While the other kids played sports or ran around having fun, Madison couldn't keep up. She would get tired very quickly, and that made her slower. Her family tried to understand why this was happening, but it took a long time and many tests before they found the answers. When they finally realized that Madison had a problem with her heart, she had already missed out on a lot of her childhood fun. Even though they figured out what was wrong, it didn't mean things would suddenly get better. They could give her medicine, but it wouldn't make the problem go away completely. There were no surgeries or treatments that could fix it, but they could help her manage it. They learned that her heart problem could suddenly make her blood pressure go up, and that's when she might faint. Even worse, if she didn't get help in time, she could die from the condition. It was a scary situation for everyone. Her parents constantly worried about her, and she had to make changes in her life. She had to make sure that she always had her meds on her, and she had to change her life to do things in safer ways. This wasn't something that was brought on by specific actions like an increase in activity. Instead, she could have a fainting spell at any time, and since you don't necessarily feel a change in blood pressure before it's too late, it can cause a problem before you know it's coming. Instead of showering, Madison had to take baths because it would be less dangerous if she suddenly blacked out. Her dad taught her how to drive, but she had to take public transport instead because it would just be too dangerous if she fainted while driving. The life she had imagined for her future was going to change completely. Then her dog died, and her heart was broken in a very different way than before. It was difficult. Her family tried to get her a trained dog that could detect heart defects and alert her when she had a spike in her blood pressure. Sadly, that wasn't an option. In her area, those dogs were really rare. There weren't many places that trained them, and the training for a dog that detects heart defects can take many years, and the waiting list for one of those pups was long. In the meantime, Madison grew up completely, went to college, and eventually started working. She wanted to move out and start her own life, but her parents were very worried about Madison living on her own. She might have been all grown up, but it was still scary for her parents to let their daughter go, especially a daughter who had as many health issues as Madison did. But they couldn't stop her. She was an adult and wanted to move. She got a job that would have made her commute too far if she lived in the suburbs where her parents lived. The choice was simple. She had to move closer to her work. It was still in the same city and only about 20 minutes from her parents' house. They could see Madison often. She got a little place with a small garden that opened right onto the street. There was public transport close to her home, and it was comfortable. But after living there for a few months, she still didn't feel completely at home. She enjoyed her freedom and independence, but the house felt very empty, especially when her job changed to a work-from-home position. It was nice to work out of her own place, but she was alone. She didn't want to move back home, but something had to change. She searched local shelters and finally found a young dog called Hank, whom she fell in love with. He was only a few months old, a mix of German Shepherd and Border Collie, with some other breeds in there too. He was a happy, sweet pup that she adored. She was planning on getting a smaller dog, but this was the one she connected with, and Hank was going home with her. It was the best decision she ever made. Hank was an awesome pup, and he gave Madison a reason to stay healthy. He needed to go for a walk each day, helping her to get fit without overdoing it. It was really sweet, but that didn't take away her issues. She still had moments when she didn't feel great. Most of the time she felt an episode coming on, but there were times it came out of seemingly nowhere. Hank lived with her through a few of these episodes. He saw her taking her pills and getting water, and how she sat down on the floor to ensure that she didn't fall. Then one day, Madison was making some coffee in the kitchen when suddenly Hank started acting strange. He kept bumping her with his nose, trying to tell her something. When she started feeling woozy, she knew what it was. He felt that something was wrong and that she needed to sit down, but the dizziness came on so suddenly that she had no time to get her meds. Her knees buckled, and she sat down on the floor. That was when Hank blew her mind. He pulled on the door handle of the fridge and then stood up against the open fridge. Hank took out some water and brought it to Madison. After that, he jumped up on the table and picked up the bottle of pills and brought this to Madison too. After that, he even brought her phone to call for help. She was able to drink her pills and felt better quickly after that. Hank would often alert her when he sensed a problem coming. He didn't have any training, but thanks to his love for Madison, he learned to alert her all by himself. It was incredible. But despite all the love in the world, things could still go wrong. One day, a cop was driving down the road, and he saw a dog on the side of the road. Suddenly, the dog ran out in front of his car, and he had to brake to avoid hitting the pup. The dog was beautiful and well taken care of. It was clear that he belonged to someone. When the police officer checked his collar, he saw that it said Hank, but the dog was still acting very weird. The dog continued to bark at the policeman, looking very anxious. He even tugged on the policeman's pants and tried to pull him. Then he let go of the pants and walked back and forth between himself and a path that led to some houses. But every time he realized the policeman wasn't following, he stopped and checked to see if the officer was coming. Finally, the man understood that the dog wanted him to follow. He was curious enough to listen, so he followed Hank. Hank led him to the next street, where he went through an open gate into a yard. The front door of a house was also open. After making sure the policeman was following, Hank went inside. Inside the house, the dog had brought him to a very scary scene. The man looked through the door and was shocked. On the floor in the living room, there was a young woman. Next to her, there were a bottle of pills and some water, but she wasn't breathing. The man thought she might be gone, but when he touched her, he felt her pulse. It was weak, but it was still there. He called for an ambulance right away and tried to help her by doing something called CPR. Hank, the dog, stayed by her side, whimpering softly. The ambulance arrived quickly and gave her oxygen. They quickly understood what was wrong because they saw her pills nearby. They were able to treat her. The policeman stayed with Hank until Madison's parents came to get the dog. Everyone was thankful to Hank for saving her life. Madison stayed in the hospital for some time, but then they allowed her to leave. Her medication was changed and started working better. Hank was the happiest to see her return home. He jumped around with joy when he saw her. Madison could only hug the hero who made sure she was okay. Hank would be getting lots of special treats as a reward.